how could you possibly have believed that it was appropriate for you to approve a nearly $500 million grant to a group that only 60 days earlier was paying for sumptuous travels for immediate members of your family?
Mr. Prime Minister. The Ethics Commissioner fully cleared Sophie's volunteer unpaid work with WE, whether it's for her podcast or her appearance at WE events or her work as a WE ambassador and ally. It was all entirely unpaid, but they reimbursed expenses, and that was clearance that was gotten in advance by the Ethics Commissioner. I did not intervene to make this recommendation happen. When the recommendation came forward from the public service, I sent it back to the public service to say, you really need to make sure that this is indeed the only organization that can deliver this program, and that this is done exactly the right way, because there is going to be careful scrutiny on this. At that point, instead, I should have recused myself, but I didn't. I decided to push back instead, and that I regret, because young people aren't having the opportunities they would have had this summer through that program, even though there's many other things we're doing for young people this summer.
Canadians are in the worst medical and economic catastrophe in a century. And I think what's very frustrating for me is that we've worked very hard across party lines to reassure Canadians that we are putting their interests first. And yet we're here today because of this, I think, very unnecessary scandal. And it comes down fundamentally to a question of your judgment. I mean, there were numerous red flags with this proposal. It fell apart the second it was announced. But the question that sticks with people is, you've been found guilty twice of breaking the Conflict Interest Act. That you seem to have this, you give an impression anyways, that you don't believe that the laws that define what politicians can and cannot do applies to you.
When I received the information that the WE charity was being chosen, recommended by public service to deliver the student grant program, I pushed back, perhaps because of the experience that you highlight, that we have had
Prime Minister,
pushbacks in the past. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed, that the public service was ready to fully justify that choice of WE charity as the only organization.
We're allowed to go back to Mr. Angus, Prime Minister.
I guess the issue is that for Canadians, the idea that this was the only game in town, that WE was the only game in town, I'm sure around your cabinet it probably was. But the fact is that the Kielburger brothers carefully cultivated their relationship with you and your brand. After you became Prime Minister, they put you on the stadium circuit. They hired your family members to the tune of $500,000. They hired the finance minister's daughter. They flew him around the world. They even made their staff go to his parties. Do you think that that's not conflict of interest? Is that conflict of interest, yes or no?
Okay, from the very first, Mr. Angus, you were unfortunately misleading people with your proposal. This was not something that we selected. This is not something that Cabinet selected. Cabinet was presented a choice by our professional public service saying, if you want to deliver this summer volunteer program, the summer grant program, it's going to have to be with this to this third-party organization. They didn't give us a choice of 2 or 3 different organizations. So when you say that it was maybe the reality around the cabinet table, but it wasn't necessarily the reality out there, you're actually impugning the very fine public servants who have done
Trudeau,
extraordinary work across this pandemic on delivering for Canadians many of these programs.
Prime Minister, there was no vetting done of WE Charity. There are major concerns with this organization. Who is responsible for the vetting?
The public service would have done their due diligence to ensure which organizations could deliver the program as we had laid it out, and they found that only WE Charity had the ability to do that through their due diligence process.
Mr. Barrett.
The organization that you approved, sir, was, you had a massive contract given to a shell company with no experience running a government grant program. That's a problem. Someone should be held accountable. Who are you going to fire?
Mr. Prime Minister.
Mr. Barrett, the public service, which has delivered extraordinary programs, including with third-party organizations. When we wanted to help out shelters, we went through United Way. When we wanted to help food banks, the Public Service reached out to Food Banks Canada to make sure that they could get that money out. They have consistently worked with third-party organizations. As part of their decision to do that, they have done full due diligence on that organization's ability to deliver the program. And
Prime Minister,
Mr.
Cabinet,
they were capable of
Prime
doing this
Minister,
on
Cabinet.
I'm going to ask you again,
Thank you
because
for your help on
nobody
timekeeping here.
nobody believes you when you say you don't know how much money your family has got from the We Group. So you've had a month to look into that. You knew you were going to testify here. Again, how much money total have your brother, mother, and spouse received from this organization? How much?
That information has been publicly shared, but I will highlight.
Well, then
that
tell
my
me what
mother,
it is.
My mother
How much?
has
Just the dollar
worked,
figure.
Throughout her life.
The dollar figure,
in
Prime Minister.
various ways, and is proud
How much?
of the work that she's done, and I'm proud of her.
How
as well.
much? I'm looking for a dollar figure.
We can get that number for you if you like. It's been out in the media.
It's been in the media, but you don't know it?
I don't have it in front of me, and quite
You don't
frankly,
know how much your family has received from this organization, which you tried to give $500 million, really?